Okay, let's talk about a little bit about where we're going now that we kind of have a little bit of a foundation for where we've come from. I'll introduce my next two guests. Adria, Nicole, you're an artist, you're a musician, you're a chef as well, vegan chef. And Kara Wolter, secretary for Metro Trans Umbrella Group. I'm curious, when you hear the last conversation about public opinion changing, about the number of states adopting same-sex marriage, how do you feel it in your everyday lives? Tell me a little bit about, I believe you've been a part of the effort to have Missouri recognize marriages in Iowa. Do you feel on a really personal day-to-day basis, are things changing over the last 5 or 10 years?
Oh, definitely, definitely. There's more conversations happening among people that just didn't happen before, whether it's related to quote-unquote gay issues, trans issues, intersex. You know, there's all this terminology that people weren't even aware of before. So I think
people may be uncomfortable to try to use too, would you say?
Yeah, but I think people are not as afraid to go ahead and ask and say, you know, well, what should I say, or what does this mean? So I think that's a great thing, just that the conversations are happening, and that's got to lead to more acceptance overall. And I definitely think that we've seen that in Missouri and across the United States.
Does that resonate with you, Kara, or are we missing the point in terms of the way it feels, the change, if it is indeed happening?
I feel like there's definitely change happening all the time. As was pointed out earlier, you know, passing of gay marriage would be, or I'm sorry, same-sex couplings would be fantastic, but it's not the only issue that we face.
There's some specific things we just heard too, like homelessness.
Exactly.
Let's just take that for one instance. How does that play into this conversation?
Well, specifically from my perspective, in the trans community, there is an overwhelming number of homeless and jobless individuals, and the disproportionate amount of discrimination and violence. And so things are looking up for the community. Things are great, but things aren't perfect. There were 226 murders of trans individuals across the world last year. And suicide rates are terrifying in the trans community. For the general population, it's roughly 4.6%, according to a recent survey. For the Lgbt community, it's 10 to 20%. For the trans community, it is 41% of trans individuals have attempted suicide in their life. And so, yes, we've made some great strides, but there are some huge steps we need to overcome. Some major education that needs to happen, and some major policy changes.
What did you make of the president when he was heckled, as we've been saying? The room kind of turned on that person. You would think that just politically speaking, the president would be a friend of that cause. What did you make of the overall response and maybe what you've seen afterwards?
There's been a lot of discussion about how she brought this topic up to the president. And there are a lot of people on different sides. And regardless of which side you come down on, she has a valid point. These immigrants that are in custody, trans women, they make up about 0.5%, I believe, of the inmates, but they are the victims of 40% of the sexual assault cases. So it is a major issue. Whether you believe that she handled it properly or not, it's an issue that needs to be addressed.
Of course, we talk about all the percentages of public opinion. If we're at 63% of folks, or whatever it might be, there's still a significant percentage of people who may very well be well-meaning in their own minds, and in fact be well-meaning, but that do not support same-sex marriage or marriage for all. What do you say to those folks who just don't quite feel like that this change is good for all?
They're entitled to that opinion, but it shouldn't affect my civil rights. That's really all I have. That's the end of the argument for me. You are entitled to feel however you feel. You do not have to approve of my gay love. You don't have to approve of, you know, the way anybody lives their lives, the decisions that they make, who they are, who they love. But we all have civil rights that are ours that shouldn't be negotiable. It shouldn't even be a question.
Tell me, can you update us on the status of that fight for the state of Missouri to recognize marriages in other states? same-sex.
Oh, we won that.
And then, but going forward, what will the Supreme Court decision then mean for the rest of the state, for the state of Missouri? What will that mean for, will that change your life?
That remains to be seen. It does change things legally, and it sets a precedence for certain rights, and that there is legal protection of those rights.
We talk about different issues that impact the LGBT community differently than other folks. How does race play into this conversation in the LGBT community within itself? Are there issues there? Is there a component in that?
Oh yes.
Tell me what that looks like.
As with everywhere else, you know, there's an intersection. There's intersectionality, and as a woman, I could marry a white man today and it not be an issue. Some years ago, that wasn't the case, and that was illegal. So I can marry a white man, but I can't marry a white woman right now. So that's where that intersection plays in, and it happens across the board, especially with the trans youth and trans youth of color. All of the statistics that Kara listed, when you add people of color to that mix, the rates are even higher for all of those things. They are at risk.
Do you have any thoughts? I asked the other two about the Caitlyn Jenner and the exposure there. Good, bad, indifferent?
I think any exposure, any visibility that gets trans people into the public eye, I think that can be good. It can be handled very poorly as well, but I think Chris Hayashi, the executive director of the Transgender Law Center, said it really well, that visibility isn't always enough. You know, I mean, especially trans women of color still face, you know, these huge disproportionate rates of violence and discrimination, and yet their stories are often ignored and left unheard. And so this visibility is great, needs to expand to include everyone, because Caitlyn Jenner's story is just one story. Her story is not mine. Her story is not the same as any other trans person I know. And making sure that the public understands that we are not all Caitlyn Jenner, I think, is very important.
Some have said that the arc of the struggle for equality for the LGBT community has been much slower, and then you see this kind of rocket ship arc for the trans community. Does it feel that way to you, or is it not moving as fast as some might think?
Well, I don't know about that. Trans individuals were heavily involved in the Stonewall riots, some of the key members in that riot, and so I feel like the trans community has been involved from the very beginning, fighting for our rights.
So maybe it's a lack of awareness.
And so maybe it's exactly a lack of awareness, and so maybe, you know, we've been making a slow climb with the rest of the LGBT community, and, you know, now we're starting to get some of that visibility that is allowing us to make some real progress. But there's still plenty of work to be done.
Very good. Thank you both for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.